Taking a life demands a life in return. Debts must be repaid. This is the unalterable principle of heaven and earth. This sentence reveals the concept of fairness held in the hearts of most people. Regardless of Eastern or Western cultures, people universally acknowledge this causal relationship. However, if you consider a question, what if the life repaid is not the same life, and the debt is not borne by the same person, but rather by a completely different soul who assumes the karma from a past life? Would that still be fair? What we are about to explore today is precisely the most fundamental and also the most paradoxical philosophical dilemma in Buddhist thought. If Buddhism teaches the concept of no self, anatta, then who is the one that undergoes rebirth? If I am not truly myself, then why must I bear the shackles of karma? In the 5th century BCE, Siddhartha meditated under the Bodhi tree for 7 days, ultimately attaining enlightenment and becoming the Buddha, thereby founding Buddhist thought that would influence Asia for millennia. One of the core beliefs of Buddhism is the cycle of karma and rebirth. According to the scriptures, every word and deed of a person, as well as even the fleeting thoughts in the mind, leave traces in the universe. These traces are known as karma. Karma does not vanish into emptiness. It returns to the agent in due time in some form. Sowing evil causes inevitably leads to reaping evil results. Uprooting good seeds will ultimately yield good karma. At first hearing, all of this seems perfectly reasonable. After all, on the level of moral intuition, we all hope that evildoers do not go unpunished and that good people are not futile in their efforts. However, when we contemplate deeply, the problem arises. Imagine yourself standing by a rushing river, its waters continuously flowing, never ceasing for a moment. The Buddha tells us in the Diamond Sutra that all conditioned phenomena are like a dream, an illusion, a bubble, a shadow, like dew or a flash of lightning. This should be viewed in this way. Our existence is like the fleeting momentary arising and passing of river water, without any fixed and unchanging essence. In Buddhism, it is referred to as anatta, non-self. However, the question arises, if I am merely a temporary combination of the 5 aggregates, form, rupa, feeling, vedana, perception, samjna, mental formations, samskara, and consciousness, vijnana, what is the relationship between my past life and my present life? Why must I in this life repay the debts incurred in past lives? This question appears simple, but is actually profound. It touches upon the most perilous logical flaw in Buddhist philosophy, the ultimate challenge that Buddhist scholars have had to confront for over 2,000 years. The sages of India often discuss this matter in the tranquil bamboo groves. One day, a young practitioner asked his master, "Master, if we are changing every moment and there is no fixed self, then who bears the cause and effect in the cycle of samsara?" The master smiled gently and poured a cup of hot tea from the teapot beside him. The tea formed a small whirlpool in the cup. "Do you see it?" The master pointed to the whirlpool and said, "The tea water is constantly flowing, and the whirlpool is continuously changing. Not a single moment is the same, but we still consider it to be the same vortex. Samsara is the same. There is no fixed self, yet karma continues to cycle." The young man pondered for a moment and then asked, "But, Shakyamuni, if there is no self, why then in this life must I bear the karmic consequences of my past lives? Isn't this very unfair?" The teacher's smile faded as he realized that this question touched upon the fundamental contradiction at the heart of Buddhist theory. In fact, this question was raised early in the development of Buddhism. During the Buddhist Abhidharma period, some schools completely rejected the existence of rebirth because they could not reconcile the contradiction between non-self, anatman, and rebirth, sasra. Other schools have attempted to find a compromise explanation, but without exception, none have been able to thoroughly resolve this issue. Imagine you are a judge standing before 2 individuals. One has committed a crime, but the one being judged is the other. This is clearly unjust. However, according to the Buddhist doctrine of non-self, anatta, The you of past lives and the you of this present life are essentially two different existences. So why should the current you be held accountable for the karmic actions of a previous life? This question is so profound that it has led to various interpretations within Buddhism, each attempting to bridge this logical gap. Let us examine several major interpretations proposed by Buddhist scholars. The first explanation is the seed and the fruit. In Buddhist scriptures, seeds and fruits are often used as metaphors to illustrate the relationship between cause and effect. A person's actions are like seeds that have been stripped away. These seeds will sprout, bloom, and bear fruit under appropriate conditions. Buddhism teaches that karma is like a seed that will ripen at some point in the future. A Zen master once used this story to explain. A person planted a fruit tree on a hillside. Many years later, although the person has passed away, the tree still bears fruit, nourishing the travelers below the mountain. The wholesome causes sown by this person, although he himself was unable to witness them with his own eyes, have indeed been brought together as fruits by others. However, this analogy does not truly resolve the issue. If sentient beings no longer exist, what relevance does the fruit have to them? In other words, if your past life has already ceased to exist, then why should you bear the karma from that past life in this present existence? Some say that the self in samsara is like a flowing river. Although each drop of water changes, the identity of the river continues. This seems to make sense, but it implicitly acknowledges a certain continuous self. This directly contradicts the Buddhist doctrine of Anatman, non-self. At this point, the Buddhist explanation encounters a dilemma. To affirm the continuation of a self contradicts the core teaching of no-self, anatta. If one insists on the notion of no-self, it becomes difficult to explain the fairness of samsara. This contradiction is so profound that it has become one of the most perplexing enigmas in Buddhist philosophy. So, how do Buddhist scholars approach this issue? What explanations have they attempted? What is the self? This seemingly simple question is, in fact, one of the most complex problems in the history of philosophy. When you say I, what are you referring to? Is it your body, your thoughts, your memories, or some intangible soul? The Buddhist answer is that I am merely a temporary combination of the five aggregates: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, like a river, changing moment by moment, with no fixed or unchanging entity. This view is called non-self, and it is one of the core teachings of Buddhism. But the problem lies precisely here. If I am merely an illusion, then who exactly is bearing the karmic consequences within the cycle of samsara? Let us examine the second interpretation proposed by Buddhist scholars. The second explanation is Alayavijnana. Mahayana Buddhism developed a new concept to address this contradiction. Alayavijnana, also known as the Storehouse consciousness or the eighth consciousness. The Alayavijnana can be understood as a repository of karma, where all karmic seeds are stored and never lost. When a person dies, the Alayavijnana carries karmic seeds into the next life, ensuring the continuity of cause and effect. The scholars of the Yogacara school explain that the Alayavijnana, storehouse consciousness, is like a bag filled with seeds. Every action leaves seeds in this bag, which will sprout under suitable conditions and influence future lives. At first glance, this seems to resolve the issue. However, upon careful reflection, one realizes that the Alayavijnana is essentially a continuous existence, which again contradicts the concept of no-self, Anatman. If the Alayavijnana, storehouse consciousness, were able to continue into the next life, would it not itself become a kind of eternal self? More importantly, even if we acknowledge the existence of the Alayavijnana, storehouse consciousness, we still face a problem. Why should the current self be held accountable for the karmic seeds stored within the Alayavijnana? If the self of this life is entirely different from that of the previous life, then such a causal relationship still appears unjust. The theory of Alayavijnana attempts to reconcile the contradiction between no-self, Anatman, and rebirth, samsara, but it introduces new problems without truly resolving the old dilemmas. This is why even within Mahayana Buddhism, there exists considerable controversy regarding the understanding of the Alayavijnana. Let us contemplate an example. Suppose in a past life you were a malevolent person who committed many negative karmas. In this life, however, you are an entirely new being. Apart from the karmic seeds carried over through the Alayavijnana, Storehouse consciousness, you have no direct connection with who you were in the previous lifetime. Then why must you bear the consequences of the evil deeds from your past life in this present existence? Isn't this imposing one person's sins onto another innocent individual? This issue is so profound that Buddhist scholars have been compelled to seek a deeper level of explanation. This leads to the third interpretation. The third explanation, the intermediate body, Bardo body. Tibetan Buddhism introduces a more mysterious concept, the Bardo body. According to this theory, after death, a person does not immediately reincarnate, but undergoes a transitional stage called the Bardo. At this stage, the consciousness of the deceased still maintains a certain continuity and is guided by karma, ultimately reborn into a new form of life. The Tibetan Book of the Dead provides a detailed description of the experiences of the Bardo body. A king will witness various visions, experience a range of emotions, and ultimately be guided by karma into a new life. The theory of the Bardo body implies that death is not a complete cessation of consciousness, but rather a transformation. This theory appears to build a bridge between the concepts of non-self, anatta, and samsara, cyclic existence. If the Bardo body can maintain a certain continuity, then causal relationships might be explained. However, the theory of the Bardo body also faces logical challenges. If the Bardo body retains certain characteristics from a past life, it essentially acknowledges a form of continuous self, which is contradictory to the doctrine of non-self, anatta. If the intermediate state body has no essential connection with either the previous life or the present life, how then does it transmit karma? You may have noticed a pattern. No matter how hard Buddhist scholars try, they seem unable to completely resolve the contradiction between no-self, anatta, and rebirth, samsara. This is not because they are not intelligent enough, but because this issue touches upon the fundamental dilemma of Buddhist philosophy. Let us temporarily step outside the framework of Buddhism and contemplate the issues of time and identity. Are you the same person now as you were 10 years ago? In a sense, yes. You have continuous memories and similar personality traits. From another perspective, the you from 10 years ago and the present, you are almost two different individuals. Your cells have been renewed and replaced, your thoughts have changed, and your energy has accumulated. This raises a crucial question. What makes you who you are? Is it the continuity of memory, the stability of character, or some deeper form of existence? This question is not only a challenge faced by Buddhism, but also a fundamental issue that all philosophical systems discussing identity and rebirth must address. However, within the framework of Buddhism, this issue becomes particularly acute because on one hand, Buddhism denies a permanent self, yet on the other hand, must explain the continuity of cause and effect. But what if we consider a different perspective? What if samsara is not the continuation of an individual, but rather a grander process? This leads to a fourth interpretation, a more radical viewpoint. The fourth interpretation views samsara as a collective phenomenon. There's a perspective that samsara may not be an individual matter, but rather a macrocosmic flow of cause and effect. Consider this. The entire universe is a vast network, with each life being a node within that network. When a node generates vibrations or actions, these vibrations transmit through the network, influencing other nodes. Karma is not born by the individual alone, but circulates throughout the entire network. This perspective is quite similar to the butterfly effect in modern physics. A butterfly flapping its wings lightly in Brazil could potentially cause a tornado in Texas. Every action creates connections in the world. These connections spread out and eventually return to the actor, though not necessarily in the form of individual reincarnation. From this perspective, the operation of karma does not require the continuation of an individual, but relies instead on the functioning of the law of cause and effect itself. The retribution of good and evil is not targeted at a specific individual, but is directed toward the entire web of life. Some may ask, if reincarnation is not an individual matter, does karmic retribution still hold meaning? The answer is that the significance of karmic retribution may not lie in personal justice, but in maintaining the balance of the universe. The retribution of good and evil follows like a shadow accompanying the form. This can be understood as the effects of good and evil being like shadows following the form. They do not disappear, but they may not necessarily return in the way we imagine. This explanation may help reconcile the apparent contradiction between non-self and causality. However, it also challenges our traditional understanding of samsara. If samsara is viewed as a collective phenomenon rather than the continuation of an individual, then what is the purpose of practice? The answer may lie in that the goal of practice is not to secure a better next life, but to attain liberation from this web of cause and effect. Nirvana is not the pursuit of a new cycle of rebirth, but the complete transcendence of the bonds of samsara. This leads to a deeper question. If there is no self in samsara, why do we seek liberation? Who is it that attains liberation? Let us return to the fundamental inquiry. If Buddhism denies the existence of a permanent self, then how do I transmigrate from one life to another? If the self in this life has no connection with the self in the previous life, how can the law of cause and effect in reincarnation hold true? Perhaps the key to the problem lies in our understanding of the self. Buddhism does not completely deny the existence of the self, but denies the notion of a permanent, unchanging, and independent self. Buddhism teaches that the self exists dependent on various conditions, much like a river relies on individual drops of water, yet it is not identical to any single drop. From this perspective, samsara is not the continuation of a self, but the continuation of dependent origination. Karma does not disappear, but it is not born by a fixed self. Rather, it is experienced by a new aggregation of conditions. Although this explanation still cannot fully resolve the contradiction between anatman, no self, and samsara, it offers a direction for contemplation. Perhaps we should not attempt to understand samsara as the reincarnation of an individual, but rather as the flow of dependent origination. It is like a forest fire, where the flames leap from one tree to another. There is no fixed fire, only a continuous process of burning that is always changing. Similarly, samsara may not be a transition from one life to another, but rather the transformation of karma from one set of conditions to another. The Buddha's final teachings before his passing may have given us a clue. All conditioned phenomena are impermanent and subject to arising and ceasing. Once arising and ceasing have ceased, that cessation is bliss. All phenomena are impermanent, subject to arising and passing away. True peace and happiness can only be attained when the arising and ceasing of phenomena have completely ceased. This passage implies that true liberation is not about seeking a better rebirth within samsara, but rather about completely transcending samsara itself. When we no longer cling to the concept of self and cease to pursue the cycle of birth and death, perhaps we can realize the nirvana and tranquility spoken of by the Buddha. Returning to the original question, if there is no self, who is reborn? Perhaps the answer is that no one is reborn. It is only the flow of causes and conditions that continues. Samsara is not a continuation of myself, but a continuation of karma. When we truly understand this, perhaps we can unravel the greatest mystery of Buddhist philosophy. In over 2,000 years of Buddhist history, this question has remained unresolved. Countless scholars and practitioners have attempted to provide answers, but their responses often lead to even deeper questions. Perhaps this question itself is a koan, an unsolvable riddle meant to inspire our wisdom and guide us beyond the limitations of conceptual thinking. As often said in Chan Buddhism, words and speech cease, and the nature of mind is extinguished. Some truth cannot be expressed through language, but can only be realized through direct experience. Perhaps the apparent contradiction between non-self and reincarnation is a koan left by the Buddha, guiding us to transcend dualistic thinking and directly experience the truth of life. Ultimately, we may need to recognize that samsara and non-self are not contradictory, but two aspects of the same truth. Just like waves and the ocean, seemingly separate, yet actually one. The waves surge and recede unpredictably, yet the ocean remains constant and unchanging. Waves are illusions. The ocean is the reality. Similarly, I am an illusion. The Dharma alone is the ultimate reality. When we let go of attachment to self and release the fear of birth and death, we may then perceive the realm pointed to by the Buddha, nirvana, tranquil and silent, transcending birth and death, no longer bound by samsara. Then, let us return to the original question. If I am not truly I, then who repays my karmic debts? Perhaps the ultimate answer is that there is no I repaying the debt. Only causality operates. Karma is not born by an individual self, but by the universal law of cause and effect. Samsara is not my samsara. It is the cycle of karma. When we truly understand this, perhaps we can, like the Buddha, see through the essence of samsara and attain true freedom. True liberation is not about seeking a better reincarnation, but about completely transcending samsara itself. As the Buddha has said, if one can perceive things as they truly are, then one has seen the Tathagata. When we truly understand the relationship between non-self and causality, we may be able to see the truth that the Buddha perceived. There is no self revolving through samsara, only dependent origination and flux. There is no self liberated, only the cessation of suffering. And perhaps this is the deepest wisdom of Buddhism, as well as the ultimate path to liberation.